You know, for as long as we've been around, we've been searching for the secret to a longer, healthier life. It's in our myths, our stories, and now our science. It's this universal obsession. But what if one of the most powerful tools for longevity wasn't some fancy new technology, but something, well, a lot simpler?
So, could it really be that simple? The idea of eating less to live longer has been floating around for a long time, backed by some pretty incredible research. But what does it actually take? And are the benefits really worth the price you have to pay? Well, a brand new, groundbreaking study is giving us some of the clearest and, honestly, most surprising answers we've ever had. All right, so to really get into this, we need to be clear about what we're talking about. This isn't just about, skipping dessert once in a while. We're talking about a very specific scientific concept.
Okay, so the official term scientists use is dietary restriction, or DR for short. Now this covers things like consistently eating fewer calories, that's caloric restriction, or cycling between eating and fasting, which you've probably heard of as intermittent fasting. And in the lab, this stuff has worked wonders. I mean, it's been shown to extend the lifespan of everything from yeast all the way up to monkeys. But for us humans, sticking to these kinds of diets is, well, it's incredibly hard, which has left a ton of questions unanswered.
And that's exactly where this massive new experiment comes into the picture. To really get to the bottom of the long-term effects of these diets, researchers designed one of the most detailed studies ever done on this topic. So picture this. They took almost 1,000 female mice. And these weren't just any mice, they were all genetically unique, which is really important because it's a lot more like the human population. They split them into 5 groups. You had one group that could just eat whatever they wanted, that's our control group. Then there were 2 intermittent fasting groups, one fasting for a day, the other for 2 days a week. And finally, 2 groups had their calories cut back, one by 20% and the other by a pretty extreme 40%. And then they just watched them for their entire lives. So what do they find? Well, the first results were just stunning. Every single one of the restricted diets extended the mice's lifespan compared to the mice who ate whatever they wanted. And the more they restricted, the longer they lived. The mice on that 40% calorie cut diet lived an incredible 36% longer. For a mouse, that's like getting an extra 9 months of life, which is just a massive amount of time. So on the surface, it looks like a total slam dunk for eating less, right?
Well, not so fast. Because as the scientists started to dig deeper and deeper into the data, the story got a whole lot more complicated. A really fascinating paradox began to pop up, one that totally challenges how we think about the link between diet, our health, and how long we live.
Yeah, it became pretty clear that this huge benefit to lifespan, it wasn't free. It came with some very real trade-offs. It forced the researchers to really start weighing the costs against the rewards.
And this quote from the study really just nails the central puzzle here. The diets that made the mice live the longest also made them lose weight and fat. But, and this is the crazy part, when the researchers looked at the mice inside any of those groups, the ones that managed to hang on to their weight and fat, they lived the longest. So, wait a minute, how can both of those things possibly be true at the same time?
The mystery just got deeper when they looked at body weight over time. Early on in life, being a heavier mouse was linked to a shorter lifespan, which, kind of makes sense. But as the mice got older, that trend did a complete 180. In their later years, being heavier was actually linked to a longer life. So that simple idea we all have, losing weight is always good, the data just blew it right out of the water.
And it wasn't just about weight. The diets absolutely improved those classic health markers we always hear about. For instance, the mice had much lower fasting glucose levels, which is usually seen as a fantastic sign of good metabolic health. But here's the kicker. Those improvements had zero connection to how long the mice actually lived. A mouse could have perfect blood sugar, and that told you absolutely nothing about whether it would outlive a mouse with higher levels.
So what in the world is going on here? Well, to make sense of all this, the researchers basically had to invent a whole new way of thinking about what the goal of something like a diet even is.
Let's try an analogy. Think about tuning a car engine, right? You could tune it for absolute maximum horsepower, top speed, pushing every part to its absolute limit. Or you could tune that same engine for everyday reliability, for fuel efficiency, for just running smoothly day in and day out. Those are 2 totally different goals, and pushing for maximum power might just wear down the parts a lot faster. This study is suggesting our biology might work in a very similar way.
And this brings us to the core finding, the big idea from all this. Improving what we usually call health and extending maximum lifespan are just not the same thing.
In fact, they might even be competing biological goals. A diet that pushes the body into an extreme survival mode to live longer might be doing that at the expense of your everyday well-being.
And you could really see these costs in the group that lived the longest, those mice with the 40% calorie cut. They had a lifelong loss of lean muscle. Their body temperatures were always lower. They showed signs that they were constantly hungry. And their immune systems changed in ways that might have made them way more vulnerable to infections. So yeah, they lived longer, but you really have to ask yourself, what was the quality of that extra time like? But hold on, because the story has one more major twist. Because after all this focus on diet, it turned out that what the mice ate wasn't even the most important factor in how long they lived, not even close.
When the researchers crunched all the numbers, diet, well, it only explained about 7% of the difference in lifespan between all those mice. But their genetic background, that explained almost 24%. Let me say that again. For these mice, the genes they were born with were more than 3 times as powerful as their diet in deciding how long they would live.
And they got super specific with this too. They actually identified a particular spot on mouse chromosome 18 that had a really strong link to longevity. It just goes to show how deep our biological programming really runs. So, let's put all of this together. What's the big picture here? This study really truly forces us to reconsider our simple definitions of what makes a diet good or healthy.
Okay, so let's recap the big takeaways. First, yes, eating less can make you live longer, but it is not a free lunch. It comes with some serious biological costs. Second, the goal of being healthy day to day and the goal of living to an extreme old age might be two different and maybe even competing things. Third, while diet definitely matters, the genetic lottery you were born into probably plays a much, much bigger role in your ultimate lifespan. And finally, all this means that how any one of us responds to a diet is deeply, deeply personal. What works for one person or one mouse might be totally different for another.
And this all leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. This research doesn't just give us data. It asks a really fundamental, almost philosophical question about what our goals are. If a strategy can add years to your life, but it subtracts from the quality of those years by making you feel cold, hungry, and weak, is it really a success? It's a question with no easy answer.